Hi, I'm Benjamin Payne. At the K-12 Education Office at Hillsdale College, we support school founding groups and their efforts to start classical schools across the country. Finding the right leader is one of the first and most important steps to building a successful school. While we do consider experience in education, we seek candidates who exhibit unwavering personal integrity, honesty, courage, and servant-hearted leadership. Perhaps that's you. If you're looking to engage in fulfilling, impactful, and challenging work protecting our nation's future and building up the next generation of virtuous citizens, we'd love to hear from you. I'm looking for strong school leaders right now. Learn more about how you can make a difference at hillsdale.edu/leader. hillsdale.edu/LEADER. That's hillsdale.edu/leader.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scot Bertram.
Thanks for listening. The Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. You also can find more information on topics and ideas discussed on this show at our website, k12.hillsdale.edu. Thanks for listening. We're joined by Matt Stone. He is Director of New Schools for Liberty Classical Schools in Atlanta, Georgia, an organization that manages both Atlanta Classical and Northwest Classical in the state. Matt, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Talking today about a neat title, Like Drinking from a Fire Hydrant, First-Year Teacher Experiences at Classical Charter Schools. Before we do, tell us a little bit about what you do at Liberty Classical Schools and about the organization itself.
Yeah, certainly. So Liberty Classical Schools is a charter management organization that currently manages 2 member schools, Hillsdale College member schools, as you mentioned, Scott. And we're really excited at Liberty because our hope is to continue growing as an organization and to continue providing a classical charter education to more families in Georgia. So that's the position I get to occupy. It's called the Director of New Schools. And that the main responsibility of that position is the application and authorizing process to future schools, working with our advancement team on community outreach to potential areas that we might start a new school in, and working with our operations team in terms of identifying a suitable facility for the school. So It's kind of a multifaceted job. It's really exciting, because we believe so strongly that we are so proud of our 2 existing schools, and we just see an incredible opportunity to, as I mentioned, to continue growing as an organization and providing this kind of education to more families.
Great. This topic today, first-year teacher experiences. Why is this so important to talk about? Why do we want to focus on this?
Well, just directly to my own job as the Director of New Schools, obviously new schools are going to need lots of teachers and potentially lots of new teachers. And so this is a topic that's on my mind just in terms of when we think about expansion and how if we were to add schools and add teachers, what we would do as an organization to continue to improve how we onboard and support them so we can achieve the types of thriving schools that we already have and want to continue improving, of course. For myself personally, I was blessed to be a Hillsdale College graduate and started teaching right after graduation at a charter school. And to be very honest, had a little bit of a rough go of it. It was a big adjustment. The first year teaching is, oftentimes known for being very challenging, sink or swim mentality, so to speak. And I think for a little while there, I sunk. And so in reflecting upon my own experience as a first-year teacher who did not come out of a teacher preparation program, who had very limited knowledge of what it meant to actually be a teacher, I made sure to, and I'm glad I did this, but I kept a journal of that year and saved those reflections, and I've always gone back to them from time to time over the course of my career. And the other facet is just when I moved into educational leadership, when I became a principal and I had a school, I always kept that in mind. So when I was recruiting and hiring and onboarding and training new teachers, I always tried to keep that experience that I had when it came to supporting new teachers as they transitioned to classroom.
So when you look back at your first year and maybe read those journals once again, What would have helped? What would have been available that would have made your transition into year one easier?
I think for me, it really would have been helpful to have some prescriptive ways to support me, especially, there's no replacement for actually just being in front of the students and learning how to interact with them. And but I didn't really know how to write a lesson plan, and I didn't really know how to make sure that the needs of our special education students were being met. I didn't really know how to assess a unit properly. Like I started to get the idea that, okay, well, the topic today is the War of 1812, so I'll just teach the War of 1812. But I didn't know how to make sure that the students actually learned anything. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was one of my main takeaways is I had a great education at Hillsdale, and I knew I was very passionate about what I was teaching. But being able to take a topic like the War of 1812 and get 37th graders, 12 and 13-year-olds excited about it, and then also making sure they learn something about it are just entirely new things that I really didn't know how to do, especially in that first year.
Why do schools struggle with this idea or this concept of supporting new teachers? And is it a particular or specific issue inside of charter schools?
I think it's a great question. In exploring some of the educational research around new teacher induction programs, there is actually quite a bit of evidence that points to a lot of school settings struggling with this very topic. I think in the traditional public school side of things, it has been assumed for a long time that teacher preparation programs and teacher colleges would prepare teachers to transition more seamlessly into the classroom. There is some research that says that, but there's also some research that says some programs are better than others, right? And so not all experiences in teacher preparation are equal. Also, with the effect of the pandemic on education, you don't have to Google search very far to get headlines about teacher shortages. And so you're seeing a lot of states, even again in traditional public schools, offer alternative certification pathways into teaching, which are attracting people into the profession that may not have gone to teacher college, so to speak. And so I think it's a problem that you're starting to see more awareness of, but not necessarily a lot of solutions of. And in the charter side, we are blessed to have flexibility in the charter school movement. Oftentimes our authorizers grant us more freedom, right, to teach our curriculum and to hire teachers, depending on the state, certified or not. And so with that power comes the responsibility of being able to actually teach that curriculum. And so in our state of Georgia, for example, we don't have to hire certified teachers. So we can hire subject matter experts. The challenge becomes, if we're hiring subject matter experts who don't have teaching experience, how do we support them effectively in the classroom?
I was going to ask that later, but I'll ask it now. We welcome teachers who come from varied backgrounds, who might not have spent the past decade in teaching. They've spent the past decade in engineering, or they've spent the past decade in design or someplace. When we welcome those teachers who come from a different career path, how do we transition them into this first year of teaching?
I think that one thing that I found in experience and just being able to see that played out so well in our schools is just a very strong emphasis on our mission. And I really can't underscore that. It really matters to us if teachers are willing or individuals are willing to make career changes and move into charter school settings, that they're doing that very intentionally, that it has to be more than just a job, but that something that transcends that. And so really understanding how that plays out in the classroom. So, for example, we want teachers with a very high definition of virtue, and we want them to really buy into this concept of they have to be virtuous. They have to set the right examples for students. Seems like so much of what, may pop up on social media is being cool or being relevant, right? And so you're looking for something even far, far more deep than that. And I think when you're looking for teachers who are potentially, or individuals who are potentially considering a switch into teaching at a classical school, for example, that's one of the areas that you really have to prioritize at the beginning.
I no means mean to dismiss the struggles, the challenges of year one, but someone could say, look, every job has challenges in that first year. You're learning a new system. There's different coworkers. Everyone's got a learning curve in that first year. So why is teaching maybe a little bit different in that first year than other professions?
Yeah, that's a great question. You could make the argument, of course, that the stakes are very high in teaching because you're educating children, and that 1 year you spend with them teaching them history or science or math or reading is essential and fundamental. And in the classical school setting, the culture of the school is so important. And so a teacher, on the flip side, to look at it negatively, a teacher that doesn't really buy into what we're trying to accomplish in terms of knowledge and virtue with students can be really detrimental to not only the students they teach, but other people see them, other teachers see them, other students see them. And so the stakes are a bit higher in terms of when you're working with people and children. But I also think that, we're seeing, especially as more emphasis has been placed on education post-pandemic, you're seeing, greater attention to the effect of teacher turnover and how detrimental, schools with high teacher attrition rates, that affects students negatively in the classroom and in terms of achievement, in terms of their performance. And it's not all about academic achievement, of course, but kind of back to this charter school model. For charter schools, we still have to perform well academically. It's part of our contract with our authorizers, and so those factors are important.
Talking with Matt Stone, he is Director of New Schools for Liberty Classical Schools in Atlanta, Georgia, about the first-year teacher experiences at classical charter schools. You've had the opportunity not just to experience it yourself, but talk to many other teachers who have gone through that year one. What did you learn from those interviews?
I had this wonderful opportunity to complete a dissertation and to focus on the experiences of teachers in classical charter schools. It was just wonderful to talk to teachers and hear their experiences, and I learned so many things. But I think the most surprising thing I learned was probably two things. Firstly, was just how important it was for them to have a school leader for them, present for them, available for them. It made me reflect immediately on myself, although I'm not currently in a school leader role, but oftentimes I think I just assumed that new teachers, maybe they had a mentor or maybe they had a department chair or someone else in the school that was sort of responsible for them. But an underlying theme that I saw time and time again was, the actual school leader was very important to new teachers. And there's some additional research that supports that. And maybe it's natural, right? You respect the number one boss of the building, right? And affirmation and support from that person probably matters to most of us in our jobs. I think the other thing that I found very important was teachers needed to be. I found new teachers oftentimes lacking confidence. The phrase imposter syndrome popped up independently of itself a few times, and I can relate. When you stand up in front of kids and you're trying to teach them something, it's sort of like, can I really do this? Yes. I mean, how do I know?
Who made me the expert here?
Exactly. Right. There are 5,000 other people that could probably do this better than me. Right. So that was a constant theme that I saw, consistent theme that I saw in the teachers, and how they built their self-efficacy was very important. And that happened through a variety of different ways, but their ability to build that self-efficacy was very important to them, not only feeling successful, but also wanting to stay in the profession.
Let's follow that for a second. How can teachers build that self-confidence that they are the ones leading the classroom, they are the experts in the classroom, and they can do this?
I think some of that comes back to just the administrative support structure that the school has in place. And when I say support, I think, I mean things like coaching and observations, but I also found just relationships, developing a relationship with your teachers. Not that you have to, administrator has time to spend an hour with each new teacher a day, right? That's not really feasible, but making an attempt to swing by their classroom, not to observe them, right? But just to say hi or just to hear what's going on this week. What are the things that are, good, and what are the things that maybe I can help with? Even little things like that. Creating an open door policy was a theme that also emerged. Just having the ability to be present or have someone present for new teachers, whether it was the head of school or some other designee, was very important.
After these interviews and the work on the dissertation, are there a few points to emphasize in terms of advice that you can give to teachers who are now entering their first year? Yeah,
for sure. I think it's very important to always, I would say this to prospective teachers interviewing firstly, but, to know the mission of the school and to make sure when you're looking at potential options to teach where you might be teaching, that the mission is something that's very important and that's carried out. It is hard to write a beautiful mission statement, but it's even harder to see that lived out every day in the school. So if it's not possible for you to visit the school, then I think you should ask some pointed questions and then understand how the school takes that mission statement and implements it on a day-to-day basis, not only with the students and families, but with the teachers as well. Because that'll be an important thing for first-year teachers to fall back on. When the work is hard, and it will be like drinking from a fire hydrant sometimes, right? But if they can see that what they're doing is tied to something greater and something more important than ourselves, I found that for all the teachers I interviewed, that was something that was a defining factor in their decision to keep teaching.
You were talking about school leaders just a few moments ago, so they're so important for the school itself and especially the first-year teachers. What should school leaders keep in mind, those people who are in a position to support these first-year teachers? And if you want to expand this too, peer support, fellow teachers, how can they assist?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for school leaders, again, kind of building rapport, building a relationship with their teachers and setting structures in place where their new teachers are supported. And so I think for charter schools, oftentimes we're resource and budget strapped. And so we may or may not be able to provide mentor teachers or other opportunities for new teachers to transition in as smoothly as possible. But I saw some examples of some creativity with that. So for example, freeing up one experienced teacher, just one period a day, right? Taking one class off her teaching schedule and designating that time for the teacher to go in and observe some of the new teachers on the grade level team. Room assignments, depending on the school, if, sharing classrooms may be the norm or again, every school is a little bit different, but, trying to pair up teachers, maybe someone who's more experienced, right? So if you have a brand new art teacher and you have an art teacher that's been teaching 3 years, facilitating that connection, right? That's a natural mentor-mentee relationship right there. And so doing what you can even logistically to try to make that happen, or finding a way to get them free, having a free period, even if it's 2 or 3 times a week, right? And then asking them, hey, can you use this time to really work on planning or just help the new teacher with whatever unit they're covering? And so I think there are ways that obviously school leaders can set those structures up that don't necessarily, that are mindful of the restraints that charter schools often have.
Did you notice any trends in your work, in your research, as to whether it is tougher for, say, a K-3 school teacher to begin a first year or a high school level teacher to begin a first year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the short answer I found was no. The struggles were just a little bit different. For younger elementary teachers, it was really building knowledge of the curriculum very quickly. And so oftentimes when you're teaching, 3rd grade, you have to teach 3 or 4 subjects. And so, or more. And so you have to know a lot about those subjects in a very short amount of time. And so that was the big learning curve. For upper school teachers, oftentimes, if it's a science teacher, for example, they know their subject, right? They know science, right? There's no question about that. But what can be more challenging for them is, how do I take my content and teach it to students, right? And again, you'll have students in your class who love science and want to be there, and you'll have students in class that don't love science and really don't want to be there. So the learning curve is more how to be able to translate what you know to your students. So I think the challenges are a little bit different, but probably equally demanding.
Something a first-year teacher might also be asking is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Does year 2 get easier, more manageable? Does experience help grease the wheels?
I actually asked this question, and I found that about 90% of my participants agreed that the second year was easier than the first. It was maybe a little, not quite as high as I thought, because for me, my second year I felt like was so much easier than the first. But there's always going to be some different experiences, right? Things that may change from the first year to the second year. But yeah, I think that, for the most part, there is some light at the end of the tunnel, and there will be hopefully lessons learned from that first year. And I would, of course, always encourage first year teachers they don't have to keep a journal, right? But to be reflective of what they do in their practice and look for ways to improve.
Matt Stone is Director of New Schools for Liberty Classical Schools in Atlanta, Georgia. They manage Atlanta Classical and also Northwest Classical. And we've been discussing, like drinking from a fire hydrant, first-year teacher experiences at classical charter schools. Matt, thanks so much for joining us here on the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast. I'm Scot Bertram. We invite you to like us on Facebook. Search for Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education. You also can follow us on Instagram at Hillsdale_K12. Hillsdale_K12 on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.